Sergeant Alara Kane hadn't signed up for babysitting. After 15 years of brutal combat in the pack wars, the last thing she wanted was to play nice in enemy territory. Yet here she was, trudging through the crowded market of Shadowcrest, the capital of the Northern Kingdom, the stench of wolf musk and territorial marking burning her nostrils. "Stay close, Storm," she muttered to the massive gray wolf padding silently at her side. The beast's ears perked up, intelligent eyes scanning the crowds that parted before them. The peace treaty was barely 3 months old. Too fresh for comfort. Too raw for trust. Alara adjusted the weight of her combat leathers, the dark material absorbing the harsh northern sunlight rather than reflecting it. Just like her, absorbing punishment rather than deflecting it. "Excuse me, ya miss." The tiny voice made her stop. Alara looked down to see 3 small wolf cubs in human form, their silver blonde hair almost luminescent, wearing delicate dresses far too fine for this rough marketplace. "What?" she grunted, her pale gray eyes narrowing. The tallest, which wasn't saying much, stepped forward. I believe your term is lost. Our guardian was supposed to meet us at the Central Plaza, but we cannot find our way back." Alara scanned the area. They were deep in the roughest part of Shadowcrest, dangerously close to areas where anti-Southern sentiment still ran hot. These cubs were definitely in the wrong place. "Where's your escort?" she asked, voice rough from years of shouting orders over battle howls. "She became separated when the crowd surged," the cub explained with remarkable composure. "We tried to find our way back, but you got more lost," Alara finished, running a hand through her short dark hair. "Perfect." She should walk away. Not her problem. But these were children, and even after everything the Northern Wolves had done, the packs they'd slaughtered, the territory they'd seized, she couldn't leave cubs in danger. Especially not here, where extremists might use royal children as leverage. "Fine," she sighed. "I'll get you back to the Central Plaza. Stay close. Don't touch anything. And for the moon's sake, don't wander off." The cubs nodded solemnly, their large golden eyes, ringed with violet, regarding her with mixed fear and fascination. "What are your names?" she asked as they began walking, Storm taking up a protective position at the rear. "I am Lyra," said the tallest. "These are my sisters, Asmira and Sarah." Alara nodded curtly. "Sergeant Alara Kane. This is Storm." The wolf's tail wagged once at the mention of his name. As they navigated the winding streets, Alara kept her hand near her blade. The cubs stayed close, occasionally reaching out to touch Storm's fur with delighted giggles that seemed out of place in the grim surroundings. "Your wolf companion is magnificent," Lyra said. "Is he a warrior beast?" Alara almost smiled. "He's a dire wolf. And yeah, he's seen his share of combat." "Like you?" Mira asked softly. Alara didn't answer, eyes scanning for threats. When they finally reached the edge of the merchant quarter, Alara realized something was wrong. The normal bustle had been replaced by eerie quiet. Shops were closing early. "What's happening?" she asked a passing wolf. The male glanced nervously at the cubs, then at Alara. "Royal announcement. All public gatherings suspended." "Royal announcement?" Alara looked down at the cubs. "Any idea what that's about?" Lyra shook her head, but something in her expression made Alara suspicious. These weren't ordinary children. Their clothes, their mannerisms, the way other wolves reacted to them. "Who exactly are you waiting for?" she asked, voice hardening. Before Lyra could answer, commotion erupted nearby. The thundering sound of armored boots, barked orders in the harsh northern tongue. "Royal Guard," Lyra whispered, suddenly frightened. "Please, we cannot be found here." Alara cursed under her breath. Whatever trouble these cubs were in, she was now firmly in it with them. "This way," she said, leading them toward a quieter side street. They found shelter in the shadow of a massive pillar supporting one of the market's loading docks. The area was deserted. "We'll wait here until things calm down," Alara said, leaning against the pillar and sliding down to sit. Storm settled beside her, alert but calm. The cubs exchanged glances before Sarah. The smallest approached cautiously. "May we sit with you? We are tired." Alara nodded reluctantly. "Just stay quiet." To her surprise, all 3 cubs immediately settled around her, their small bodies pressing against her chest, as if seeking protection. Lyra positioned herself on her left, while Mira and Sarah curled up on her right, heads resting against her shoulders. "Hey, I didn't mean," Alara started, but the cubs had already closed their eyes, breathing slowing. Alara sighed, resigned to her fate. The weight of the day's patrol, combined with unexpected cub-sitting, began to take its toll. She found her own eyelids growing heavy. "Just a few minutes," she told herself. "Just until the commotion dies down." She woke to cold steel pressed against her throat. "Omega!" a voice hissed. "Do not move." Alara opened her eyes to find herself surrounded by at least a dozen Northern Royal Guards, their armor gleaming. Their weapons, silver blades and crossbows, were all pointed at her. The cubs were still there, all 3 peacefully curled against her chest, asleep despite the commotion. Storm stood tensely at her side, a low growl building. "Stand down, Storm," Alara commanded softly. The wolf reluctantly complied, but remained vigilant. The circle of guards parted, and a tall figure stepped forward. Even without the elaborate crown and ceremonial armor, Alara would have recognized royalty from the way he carried himself. His presence was overwhelming, pure, dominant alpha power that made her Omega instincts scream for submission. She bit down hard on her tongue, using pain to stay upright. He was massive, easily 6'6", broad-shouldered, wrapped in black furs and leather. His hair was dark as midnight, falling to his shoulders, some sections braided with silver and bone. His face was carved from stone, hard jawline, high cheekbones, a scar bisecting his left eyebrow. But it was the eyes that stole her breath, golden, ringed with violet, exactly like the cubs. This was Alpha King Darius Nightfang, the Northern King whose forces had battled the Southern packs across 3 territories before finally agreeing to peace. And the 3 little cubs sleeping against her chest were his daughters. Well, Alara thought grimly. Fuck. "Rise, Omega," Alpha King Darius commanded, his voice carrying authority that brooked no argument. Alara carefully shifted the sleeping cubs, gently laying them on the ground before standing to her full height. Even in her combat leathers, she was a foot shorter than him. "Your Majesty," she said, offering a stiff military bow. "Sergeant Alara Kane, Southern Pack Forces." The king's piercing eyes studied her with unnerving intensity. "Sergeant Kane, you have something that belongs to me." "With all due respect, Your Majesty, they found me. They were lost in the roughest part of Shadowcrest, dangerous territory for anyone, especially royal cubs." A flicker of something, concern perhaps, crossed his features before disappearing. "And you decided to... what? Abduct them?" The guards tensed. Storm growled. "I decided to protect them," Alara replied evenly, refusing to be intimidated. "Which is more than I can say for whoever was supposed to be watching them." Dangerous silence fell. The king's eyes narrowed, and Alara prepared herself for the possibility that the fragile peace might end right here, with her executed for insulting Northern royalty. Instead, to her shock, Alpha King Darius laughed, a rich, deep sound that seemed to catch even his guards off guard. "You have courage, Sergeant Kane. Few would dare speak so boldly to me." He gestured to his sleeping daughters. "And fewer still would earn such trust from my cubs. They are selective about whom they favor." As if on cue, the youngest cub, Sarah, stirred and blinked awake. Seeing her father, she jumped up with a delighted cry. "Papa! You found us!" She rushed to him, and the king knelt to embrace her, his entire demeanor transforming from intimidating monarch to concerned father. The other 2 cubs woke at the commotion, both looking relieved. Yes, little one, Darius said, voice softening, though it seems you found a protector in my absence. Lyra, the eldest, approached with more decorum. The Omega Sergeant was most kind, Papa. When we became separated from Matron, she guided us away from danger. Did she now? The king's gaze returned to Alara, assessing her with new interest. And how did you come to be sleeping with my daughters, Sergeant? Alara felt heat rise to her face. They were tired. I offered to let them rest while we waited for things to calm down. I didn't expect to fall asleep myself. She was warm, Mira offered helpfully. Omegas are warmer than we are. The king's lips curved slightly. Indeed. He rose to his full height. Sergeant Kane, I find myself in the unusual position of owing a debt to a southern wolf. My daughter's safety is beyond value. No debt necessary, Your Majesty. Anyone would have done the same. Would they? His tone suggested he knew better. I think not. Particularly not a southern veteran of our recent disagreements. Alara said nothing. He wasn't wrong. I have a proposition for you, Sergeant. The king stepped closer, and Alara caught his scent. Pine, snow, and something uniquely him that made her wolf whine with want. The peace between our packs is new and fragile. I require someone who understands southern wolves to serve as cultural liaison at court. Alara blinked in surprise. With respect, Your Majesty, I'm a soldier, not a diplomat. Precisely, Darius said, eyes gleaming. I have diplomats aplenty. What I need is someone who understands how southern warriors think. Someone who can speak plainly. He stepped closer still, close enough that she could feel his body heat. Besides, he added, voice dropping, my daughters seem to have taken a liking to you. They have excellent instincts about character. Alara glanced at the three cubs watching with hopeful expressions. Even Storm seemed to be giving her a look that said, well? This isn't really a request, is it? She asked quietly. Darius's smile was wolfish. No, it's not. How long? Initially 1 moon cycle, after which we can reassess the arrangement. Alara considered her options, which were effectively none. I'll need to inform my commanding officer. Already taken care of, Darius said. Your colonel seemed quite eager to loan you to the Northern Court. Something about fostering goodwill. Of course he would. Having one of his officers serving in the Northern Royal Court was a political coup. When do I start? Immediately, the king replied. My transport awaits. As the royal party began to move, Darius fell into step beside Alara. Away from his guard's ears, he spoke lower. There is another reason I requested you specifically, Sergeant Kane. Oh? I am curious about southern wolves, he said, his eyes briefly scanning her form in a way that was decidedly not diplomatic. Your pack fought with remarkable passion. I find myself wanting to understand that passion better. Alara felt her pulse quicken despite herself. The king's proximity was having an unexpected effect. He was undeniably attractive, powerful, commanding, magnetic. I'm not sure I'm the best example of my pack, Your Majesty. I disagree, he said, voice carrying a hint of something that might have been flirtation. A warrior who protects cubs not of her own pack? I think you may be exactly what I need to understand southern wolves better. Before Alara could respond, they reached the royal transport, a massive carriage drawn by 6 dire wolves. The cubs had already boarded, chattering excitedly about having a southern wolf at court. After you, to Sergeant, Darius said, gesturing to the entrance. Welcome to your new assignment. As Alara stepped aboard with Storm at her heels, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking into something far more complex than a simple diplomatic posting. The way the king had looked at her, there was more than political interest there. And despite her better judgment, she found herself intrigued by the possibility. 1 week later. Your stance is too rigid, Sergeant, Alpha King Darius said, circling her in the private training yard. You must flow like water, not stand like stone. Alara adjusted her position, acutely aware of his eyes on her. He'd insisted on these daily cultural exchange sessions, which seemed designed to push her beyond her comfort zone. Today's lesson: Northern ceremonial combat. In Southern combat training, we're taught stability creates power, she explained, demonstrating her stance. Interesting. Darius moved closer, his tall form radiating heat. May I? Before she could respond, his hands were on her shoulders, adjusting her posture. His touch was firm but gentle, professional yet somehow intimate. Omegas generate remarkable body heat, he observed, fingers lingering longer than necessary. A biological advantage in combat, perhaps. It has its uses, Alara replied, trying to ignore the effect his proximity was having. Especially in cold territories. And does it serve other purposes? His voice dropped to a lower register that sent shivers down her spine. Before she could formulate a response that wouldn't constitute a diplomatic incident, alarms blared throughout the palace. Perimeter breach in the eastern sector, announced a voice over the comm. All royal guards to defensive positions. Darius's expression hardened instantly. The cubs, where are they? Garden pavilion with their tutors, Alara replied, already moving. The royal guard will... With respect, Your Majesty, I'm not waiting. Alara broke into a run. Storm appeared from the sidelines to join her. The palace gardens were a sprawling maze. As Alara sprinted through winding paths, she heard the distinctive crack of crossbow bolts ahead. She rounded a corner to find 2 royal guards down, 3 figures in dark clothing advancing on the pavilion where the cubs and their tutors huddled in terror. Without hesitation, Alara charged. The attackers turned, surprised to encounter a southern wolf. That moment of hesitation was all she needed. She tackled the first assailant with a flying leap, struck his throat to disable him, then rolled away as crossbow bolts scorched the ground. Storm entered the fray with a snarl, latching onto the second attacker's arm. Alara seized the dropped crossbow and fired 2 precise shots at the third assailant, leg and shoulder, disabling without killing. The entire encounter lasted less than 30 seconds. Royal guards flooded the area moments later, securing the attackers. As Alara approached the pavilion, the 3 cubs rushed to her. That was amazing, Lyra exclaimed. You moved so fast. Are you hurt? Alara asked, checking each for injuries. We are unharmed, thanks to you, said the tutor, bowing deeply. Darius arrived with his personal guard, his face a mask of controlled fury that softened when he saw his daughters safe. He issued rapid orders before approaching Alara. You disobeyed protocol, he stated, though there was no anger in his voice. Royal guards are responsible for the cubs' safety. With respect, Your Majesty, I don't leave children in danger while waiting for protocol. A murmur ran through the assembled guards. Such directness to the king was unheard of. To everyone's surprise, Darius smiled. No, you don't. That seems to be a southern trait I find increasingly valuable. He turned to address the gathered wolves. Behold the actions of our southern liaison. While we debated procedure, she acted. This is why the alliance with the South will strengthen us both. The guards thumped their fists against their chest plates in salute, to Alara. Saptias. Later that evening, after the cubs were safely tucked into bed with additional guards posted, Alara found herself summoned to the king's private study. She entered cautiously, Storm at her heels. Darius stood by a large window overlooking the capital, its lights twinkling in darkness. He'd removed his ceremonial armor and wore a simple tunic that accentuated his powerful form. The attackers were hired mercenaries, he said without preamble, paid by elements opposed to the North-South alliance. Alara frowned. Who benefits from restarting the war? Those who profited from it. Darius turned to face her. You saved my daughters today. Again. Just doing my job, Your Majesty. No, he said, moving closer. Your job is cultural liaison. What you did today went far beyond duty. He stopped before her, close enough that she could detect his scent again. Pine and snow, and something that made her wolf beg to submit. I've been testing you, Sergeant Kane, he continued, pushing you to see how you would respond under pressure. I noticed, Alara said, unable to keep irritation from her voice. And yet, you exceeded every expectation. His eyes searched her face. Southern wolves are puzzling creatures. You fight with such ferocity, yet show such tenderness to cubs. You speak plainly when it would be politically advantageous to lie. We're not that complicated, Alara replied. We just value straightforward action over political games. Perhaps that is what my court needs more of, he mused. What I need more of. The air between them charged with electricity. Alara was acutely aware of his proximity, of the subtle shift in his posture that brought him even closer. There is another southern trait I find myself curious about, Darius said, voice taking on that lower register again. Your capacity for passion. Is it as formidable as your capacity for combat? Alara swallowed hard. That's not a diplomatic question, Your Majesty. No, he agreed, a smile playing at his mouth. It is an entirely personal one. He reached out, fingers brushing her jawline with deliberate slowness. Perhaps it is time we move beyond diplomacy, Sergeant Kane. The invitation in his eyes was unmistakable, and despite every rational thought screaming this was a terrible idea, Alara found herself responding to it. There was something magnetic about him, a pull she couldn't explain or resist. As his face tilted down toward hers, the palace alarms blared once more. Both warriors instantly shifted to combat readiness. Status report! Darius barked into his comm. The response came with strange hesitation. Your Majesty, the alarm was triggered from the cub's quarters. Darius's expression transformed from battle-ready to suspicious. The cub's quarters? Are they in danger? No, Your Majesty. They appear perfectly fine. The system indicates deliberate activation. Alara and Darius exchanged glances. I'll handle this, he said. I should accompany you, Alara offered, if there's any chance this is related to the earlier attack. I suspect this is an entirely different sort of invasion, Darius replied with exasperation, but your presence may be useful. They walked briskly through corridors, guards snapping to attention. When they reached the cubs' quarters, they found not danger, but 3 cubs sitting on the floor surrounded by board games, looking up with practiced surprise. Papa! Lyra exclaimed. And Sergeant Kane! What a pleasant surprise! Indeed, Darius said dryly. Almost as surprising as the palace-wide alarm that originated from this room. The 3 cubs exchanged guilty glances. An alarm? Mira asked unconvincingly. We heard nothing. Storm patted over to Sarah, who immediately buried her face in his fur, hiding her giggles. Perhaps, Alara suggested, struggling to maintain a serious expression, there was a malfunction. Perhaps, Darius agreed, though his tone made clear he wasn't fooled. A malfunction that coincidentally occurred just after you were supposed to be asleep. We couldn't sleep, Lyra offered. We were discussing Southern customs. Southern customs? Alara raised an eyebrow. Yes, Sarah piped up. Like how Southern wolves show affection. It's very different from Northern wolves. Alara felt heat rise to her face as Darius shot her a sidelong glance. Is that so? The king asked. And what have you learned? Southern wolves nuzzle with their noses, Mira stated. And they sleep very close together when they trust someone, like how we slept on Sergeant Kane that day. And they mate for life, Sarah declared triumphantly, like the swans in the garden. Silence fell. Alara stared at the ceiling, wishing for another attack to save her from this conversation. That's quite enough cultural research for tonight, Darius said firmly. Now, which of you triggered the alarm? 3 pairs of eyes dropped to the floor. Why, it was my idea, Lyra finally admitted. But Mira knew how to bypass the security protocols, and Sarah actually pressed the button. A collaborative effort, then, Darius observed. And may I ask why? The cubs exchanged another look before Lyra answered. We wanted to see if Sergeant Kane would come to rescue us again. She's very good at rescuing. And we wanted to see if you would come together, Mira added innocently. Alara bit the inside of her cheek to keep from laughing. I see, Darius said sternly, though his eyes betrayed amusement. Well, your experiment has yielded results. Now for the consequences. No garden privileges for 3 days, and you will apologize to the head of security tomorrow. The cubs nodded solemnly, though they didn't seem particularly devastated. Sergeant Kane will escort me back to my study, and you 3 will go to sleep immediately. Understood? Yes, Papa, they chorused. As they turned to leave, Sarah called out, Sergeant Kane, will you tell us a Southern bedtime story tomorrow? Alara glanced at Darius, who gave a slight nod. If your behavior warrants it, she replied. Once in the corridor, Darius let out a soft laugh. I apologize for my daughter's meddling. They seem to have developed quite an attachment to you. No apology needed, Alara said. They're smart cubs. Too smart, maybe. He paused, studying her. They're not wrong about everything, though. Oh? Southern wolves do nuzzle to show affection, he said, voice softening, and northern wolves press foreheads together. But we're not ignorant of other methods. They had reached his study door. Darius turned to face her fully. I'm curious, Sergeant, he said, voice dropping to that register that sent heat through her. Is it true that southern wolves mate for life? Alara held his gaze. Some do. It depends on the connection. And what determines the strength of such a connection? Compatibility, trust, mutual respect. She paused. Attraction doesn't hurt either. And do you feel these things are possible between northern and southern wolves? The question was direct, his eyes never leaving hers. I think, Alara said carefully, that some connections transcend pack boundaries. Darius stepped closer, eliminating space between them. Then perhaps we should continue our cultural exchange in private. He reached out, his hand facing upward, a northern gesture of invitation. Alara placed her hand against his, their fingers intertwining. As the study door closed behind them, Alara realized the cub's matchmaking scheme might have succeeded after all. Epilogue, 6 months later. And then the brave southern wolf rescued the 3 northern cubs from the terrible rogues, Alara concluded, her voice dropping dramatically. Seated on plush cushions around her, the 3 royal daughters stared with wide, enraptured eyes. Even Storm, sprawled across the floor, seemed to be listening. Did the wolf marry the king afterward? Sarah asked eagerly. Alara coughed. The story doesn't say. Some things are left to imagination. I think she did, Mira declared confidently. Just like you and Papa. We're not, Alara began, then stopped. What were she and Darius? 6 months of stolen moments between royal duties. 6 months of building something she'd never expected. You sleep in Papa's chambers now, Lyra pointed out pragmatically. That means you're his mate. It's complicated, Alara hedged. Why? Sarah asked. You like Papa. Papa likes you. We like you. What's complicated? Out of the mouths of babes, Alara thought. Well, for one thing, I'm Southern, and your father is Northern. That makes things different. Different is good, Lyra said firmly. Papa says diversity strengthens the kingdom. Before Alara could respond, Darius entered the common room, moving with that predatory grace that still made her pulse quicken. There you are, he said, his eyes warm as they found her. The council meeting ended early. He approached, and without hesitation, pulled Alara to her feet and into his arms, a public display of affection that would have been unthinkable months ago. The cubs giggled. You're corrupting the king's dignity, Alara murmured against his chest. The king's dignity, Darius replied, pressing his forehead to hers in the northern gesture, is less important than the king's happiness. Papa's happy now, Sarah announced to her sisters. He smiles all the time. Because he found his mate, Mira added. Just like in Sergeant Kane's stories, Lyra finished. Darius laughed, that rich, warm sound that Alara had learned to treasure. Perhaps the cubs are wiser than we give them credit for, he said, his arms tightening around Alara. Perhaps, she agreed, I rising on her toes to press her lips to his, a southern gesture he'd learned to appreciate. As the cubs cheered and Storm's tail thumped approvingly, Alara reflected on the strange path that had led her here. From battle-hardened soldier to reluctant liaison to, whatever this was, home, family, love. 3 lost cubs had curled up on her chest seeking warmth, and in doing so, they'd given her something she'd thought lost in the war, a reason to believe in peace, a reason to believe in second chances, a reason to believe that sometimes the fiercest warriors find their greatest strength not in battle, but in the courage to embrace what they thought was impossible. And sometimes the most unexpected families are the ones that feel most like home.